Up only.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Up only.
Hello and welcome to Up Only TV. I'm Ledger. Cobie's on the way. Hasu's with us today. Super excited to talk to him. Before we get to it, let me tell you about our partners at FTX. Go to uponly.tv/FTX. You can make a trade there today. Swap directly from one asset to the other. It's easy. You should know how to do it. It's right there on your mobile phone. Just go to uponly.tv/FTX. It's got the same portfolio tracking tools that you've known and loved since 2014. Plus, you can earn yield on your tokens these days. You can get, I believe, 8% up to $10,000 and 5% beyond $10,000. Check it out today, uponly.tv/FTX. Let's get to the show. Cobie, how you doing?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
I am doing well, sir. Excited.
I like your Solana swag. Can you give us a bit? Can you do like a little catwalk thing? A little bit of a, give us a little twirl. That was great, mate.
Yeah, thanks. So, I'm tied down, you know.
You're a natural. How you doing? I feel like I haven't seen you in ages, mate.
Yeah, we've been busy. I have new eyes. We talked about that, I think. They're very dry, but they're good. And I stayed up too late last night. This is top things, I have to warn you. But I stayed up late drinking bourbon with Sicarius and Messi last night till like 3 a.m. And my body is not able to do that anymore. Like, I'm too freaking boomer for that. And I hurt so bad today.
Well, welcome. Someone in the chat says Cobie volume down or Ledger volume up. So it might be your mic or mine. Let me know what you want me to do.
Naturally. I turned you down, turned me up. We do both.
All right, cool. Hasu, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Doing great.
Do you know why on Twitter today everyone is a Hasu?
No, I wish I knew. I only knew that Mooney started it, and then others started.
Yeah, I saw Moon is a Hasu, and I saw People Pleaser is now Hasu Pleaser.
Yeah, that is like unironically the highlight of my life thus far.
So you just don't know what's going on? No one spoke to you about it?
No.
All right, well, I like it. It's a coincidence that today's the Hasu episode too.
I got my People Pleaser signed Forbes issue because Cobie, after you got yours, I FOMO'd so bad I like panic DM'd and was like, "Can you please send me one of these things? I need it so bad. Don't let Cobie have this over me." So I'm very excited.
Yeah, you need to stop touching it with your grubby hands, mate. You gotta get it like laminated or something.
Dude, these hands are soft and delicate. Like,
we know about your synthetics trade. Right, so Hasu, host of Uncommon Core. Is your job just like general, like you like think about shit and write it down? Is that what you do?
Yeah, it's I've been hitting the dating scene recently, and I'm struggling with like the question of what do you actually do. But even when I'm talking to crypto people, I'm like no better at explaining it. So yeah, like thinking about stuff and like being like a dog in a field that's just following like different butterflies. Like one day you go in this direction and next day you go in another direction, right? And just always like learn about different stuff. And
wait, is that about your job or about the dating scene?
No, that's my job.
Right.
Could you read us your dating profile bio? I think it tells us a lot. I mean, you can go a lot of directions, right? You can say like, I'm a cryptocurrency thought leader. Like you could go that way. Or you could say like, I'm a research analyst in finance. You know, like you could bore it down a little bit. There's so many directions you could go here.
I think I've gone like with a very short, like self-deprecating joke. Nothing at all like about my.
I've got a more important question about your dating profile. And for people that are tuning in for the first time ever because they've seen Hasu like a very serious, very serious person with like some nuanced thoughts on crypto, just bear with us. We'll get to it, but we just need to get the important stuff out of the way first. Is your profile picture and your dating profile your anime avatar, or is it a picture of you?
Oh, it's a picture of me. I only
All right,
use
okay.
this avatar in crypto.
All right, that makes sense. That makes
like
sense.
doing
So,
an-
how did you?
Go ahead.
After you, let's go on.
No, I was just saying, I don't know. I haven't dated in like 18 years. But it seems like a anime picture in your dating profile is not a key to success. I don't know.
I might start a Ledger Tinder account and just put some classic Ledger photos in there and make a bunch of friends. Anyway, Hasu, how did you get into crypto? How long you been doing this? How did you end up on this miserable show?
Yeah, I started thinking about crypto in like early 2018, I would say. Before crypto, I used to play online poker for a whole decade.
For a decade?
Yeah, for a whole decade.
That's wild.
Yeah, I used to be one of the longest standing players. Some are still going, but mostly the scene has dried up, which is sort of is expected, right? So chess used to be played for money. Backgammon used to be played for money. There used to be all these games that were played for money, and then over time, just bad players lost interest. Good players kept getting better, and the games kept getting solved. Right? Like chess programs, backgammon programs, all these games are now virtually solved. And then they just go out of fashion, and something else comes around, and so many people that I used to know that used to play poker are all now in crypto. So I would say crypto has definitely replaced poker as like a place where people go to gamble in that regard.
All right. So you came over from like professional gambling basically into crypto 2018. Did you join in like January 2018 at the absolute top?
Yes, I did.
Nice.
Yeah,
What were you going to say, Ledger?
I was just wondering, do you think that what you're talking about, like how these things are just more and more difficult to do professionally, that the edge just gets lost as people become more efficient, or like essentially those markets become more efficient?
Yeah, definitely. So the edge, like one part of the problem is that the edge that the good players have on the bad players just keeps getting bigger. And they just, they stop playing because they don't feel like losing like everything they deposit in like an hour or something. And the edge between the good players keeps getting smaller. Mm-hmm. And both of those factors combined tend to, kill a game over a long enough period of time.
Fair enough. Kind of what happens in a crypto bubble, right? Like 3AC takes everyone's money, and then no one else, the people don't want to play anymore. They're just like, I'm giving all my money to Kyle. I'm going to give up. I'm going to stop playing. And then you have to wait 3 years to do it again. So you joined at the absolute top in 2018, and what did you put a bunch of money into like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then like lose 80% of it, or did you just like join, not financially join, but join sort of in spirit and intellectually join, perhaps?
I did fall down like an intellectual rabbit hole, definitely, when it came to crypto, but I'm someone who always has to have skin in the game. And so like I had to invest money before I could even like think about it seriously. I bought Ether, was actually first thing I bought, and then I bought some Bitcoin as well. And I kept buying all throughout my first 2 years in crypto, basically dollar cost averaging from 2018 to all throughout 2019. And so I never lost quite like 80% of what I put in, but it wasn't that far off. So definitely came in during the deepest bear market. And
so 2018 was when you made your first buys, not when you like went full time. Okay.
Yeah. Well, already in 2017, I had stopped playing poker and was looking for something new, and I was ready to pick up something full time. And I would say like pretty early on in crypto, I started doing it full time, just learning about it, reading about it, trying to meet people and build a network and like catch up. I thought when I came in, I thought I was like so far behind everyone else, because everyone has already been here, right, for years, many of them. And I was just like coming in brand new, and so I was thinking, yeah, I'm never going to catch up to these guys. And I was just, spending a lot of time on it, trying to change that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think because crypto markets historically are just up only, people that have been in early often get kind of complacent with keeping up with new stuff, or like at least the real bleeding edge stuff. So like the early Bitcoin OGs. Obviously, there's exceptions, but a lot of them get complacent. They make a bunch of money, so it's not really worth them keeping up with the nuance of like what's happening with Chainlink, or they weren't really paying attention at the beginning of DeFi. They just sort of switch, like take a step back and start playing macro moves. So I think there is always, you join, you think you're really far behind everybody else, but if you're willing to put that effort in and like do a bunch of research and learn really hard, it doesn't take that long to catch up. Maybe it's a bit different now because like there's all these like professional funds these days, and they've all hired people to do this as a real job instead of it just being like 30 people trying to steal money from each other. So maybe it's a bit different. But how did you go from I'm really far behind, I'm just going to learn as much as I can, to doing your writing stuff for Paradigm, writing for, I think you still write for Deribit, or you at least used to. You do the podcast with Sue. How did all that stuff happen? Like, take us on the journey. I want to feel like I was there.
That's a good question. So one thing that I definitely remember well is, it was sort of, for the first half of like 2018, I was thinking nobody would hire me anyway, right? Because I'm completely new in this space and I still have a lot to learn. But then at some point, started to get job offers from like for example, media outlets, but also like one or two funds as like an analyst or something. And I turned everything down because I thought I'm much better off investing into myself for at least the first 2 years. So basically gave myself like a ban on basically joining anything and that's not working for myself for the first 2 years. And just thought, I think I see like crypto seemed so like meritocratic at the time. It still is today, but maybe less so than back then. Everything was basically out in the open. So I thought, if I can become, someone on crypto Twitter, then I can have really amazing conversations with great people. And so I invested a lot into that. I basically spent a ton of time on Twitter, curating my feed, basically like tweeting a lot, like engaging in actual conversations, which nowadays you don't see that as much anymore. I think but maybe it's a bull market thing. Like compared to like in a bear market, you only had people there like were really in it for, because they were interested in it and like long-term believers, and they were often very eager to engage with you, even if you were like in a completely new account. So I had like a fantastic experience coming into crypto. Everybody was so open, so many people at the DMs open or were like freely responding to you. And so that's something that I've always done as well when I got bigger. Always have open DMs, and I respond to almost everything, at least everything that's in good faith. Yeah, I've heard that from like a lot of people, right? That they have to close their DMs because they get so much bullshit. I don't really get that much stuff.
I only got people asking for money, or then people saying that they would kill themselves if I didn't send them money, and that's when I closed my DMs. I was like, I'm not going to deal with this stuff anymore, because you never know if it's real or not. It's just like, I don't want to read about this. It's like, I can't give everyone that sends me a DM money because I'd have no money left.
That's horrible. Yeah.
All right, so you just wanted to sort of get involved, prove that you have like smart thoughts on like current stuff, important issues in crypto, and like contribute, I guess, to shaping where particular projects or whatever goes. And then Sue messaged you out of the blue and were like, I like your shit. What happened?
I think it was someone, like one of those guys who I mentioned, like who were just very freely talking to me in DMs. It wasn't Sue, it was someone else, someone I'm still talking to today, but who's quit Twitter. He invited me to like I think it was a private Discord, and then quickly migrated it to Telegram. And Sue was one of the people in that group. It was like a handful of different traders, basically. And I wasn't even a trader myself, but They just thought like I had like a deeper understanding of like the fundamentals of crypto and the tech, and they had like a huge amount of market knowledge, but maybe not as deep an understanding of the tech, and so that's why they invited me. And yeah, I think it was like 7 to 8 people, and one of them was Sue, and we immediately kicked it off and started talking a lot after that, or basically every day, for like weeks, if not months, and yeah, somehow started writing articles together as well on Medium at first.
So you get the Sue messages where he sends you like a list of questions about like your allocations and how you think other people are allocated and all that shit.
No, it was totally different back then. We were only talking about like real deep fundamental stuff and like real yeah, I don't know, like
I feel like
real long-term stuff, basically.
Yeah, I feel like there are two classes of conversations during the bear market, and one was like crypto soup group, you know, like just people just very poor and not really having anywhere else to go. And then there was people that were doing a lot of like more in-depth research, and those people ended up being the ones that were really decently positioned going into early DeFi stuff to catch the markups well before like DeFi summer even came about. And it seems like you really were in that second group where even though you came in later, you were really well positioned to then take advantage because you had done a bunch of fundamental research to see like where some of the trends might pop up for the next cycle, versus, just like coping in your crypto soup group type chats, and then being there the entire bear market and still managing to be late as the not that I have any personal experience doing that or anything. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like you were able to take good advantage of the bear market?
I mean, so for investing into my network and my brand and like everything, I think I took really good advantage of it. Some other stuff I would have definitely liked to like have taken more advantage of it. For example, like when you're, I always had like two theses about crypto. One is it's like really useful for money. So like I always had like a strong belief in Bitcoin and basically anything that can rival Bitcoin. But the second one was DeFi, even though we didn't call it that. I thought, well, it's also really useful to write applications that sort of build on this collateral layer, right? Or this layer of new trustless, purely digital collateral. And there's like a whole lot of things that you can do with that. But then when the actual DeFi came around on Ethereum, like ETH Lend and Uniswap, I didn't take it too seriously. Even though I had like the thesis and everything written out and had for like 1.5 years. But I just when I saw it, it didn't really register for me that this is the real deal. So that's something that I definitely regret, that I didn't stick to my own, thesis well enough.
Especially with ETH Lend. I don't know why. I think it was just the name. ETH Lend, I was like, that doesn't sound like a good thing. Doesn't sound, that's rubbish. Uniswap, I think, made a bit more sense. But I'd love to ask you, you were in these like I guess long-term vision type conversations way back then. What were the sort of things that you were talking about, and which have like sort of played out as, I guess, accurate or prophetic, perhaps, and which of you like it seems to be trending the opposite way to what you expected?
I would say it's almost like I would put it all under like the umbrella of like crypto existentialism, if that makes any sense. Because back then, like when you were in a bear market and have been for like a year or whatever, and you just don't know if crypto is going to be around in 5 years or 10 years. I think now, like in a bull market, everybody thinks like crypto is the new paradigm. There's no way it's going to disappear. But in a bear market, that's not what everybody thinks. You need a lot more conviction to stay around, and you need to do a lot more to create that conviction for you if you want to be someone who can hold through it. And I would say that's what we did. We had a lot of conversations, about the very distant future of crypto, and not so much like, okay, so what is the next thing that we can invest in? It was really all very heavy macro stuff, like comparing Bitcoin and gold, and like when does gold perform well, for example, like looking into like gold as an asset in order to learn something about Bitcoin, or thinking about, the role of stable coins, because back then also people thought, well, Tether was growing like crazy, but Bitcoin was only going down. It was like, okay, so what if crypto is actually like more useful for stable coins? These were all thoughts that we had at the time. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely this like creating these like very long-term thesis. I'm trying to think of something that like we got very wrong. If something comes to mind, I will mention it for sure.
Mostly we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then I'd like to ask, I guess, a bit more in the current and now type question, because it's all well and good having these sort of long-term theses and going, I can see DeFi playing out like this because like a decentralized finance system has a bunch of advantages over a traditional system, and blah blah blah. But how, if you're new to crypto, or maybe you're new to crypto at some point this year, and you've made a little bit of money, but you're watching this and you're like, cool, like I wasn't here in 2019, so I didn't have these like long-term thesis, and now maybe I kind of get it. I kind of get it now, but like, isn't everything super inflated in price? Everything's gone up only for basically 18 months. So what should people be doing if they're joining now and like now believe these theses, but they just learned them too late? What should they be doing now to take advantage of it? How should they be positioning? Should they be just fucking aping everything? Or should they be doing something different, in your opinion, as a non-financial advisor and a fellow moron?
It's really hard to answer, right? It's so easy to...
You can't tell them the actual answer when you need them to be liquidity for your exits.
Yeah, I'm actually maybe more reliable as like an indicator for that, because I don't really sell. Like I don't have no plans on selling like when the bear market comes around. I consider myself a real long-term holder, or quote unquote idiot. So a useful idiot. But yeah, you need those as well. So I don't have the illusion that I can make great investment decisions, and I think that like this bull market has already been like a good example of that. I think if I had trusted my instinct, then I would have like de-risked so many times, thinking like we are now back in the bear market, and basically I would have been left on the sidelines when it then went back up like a week later. I've been keeping track of sort of my intuition on what I think the market will do, and I got it like wrong more often than I got it right. Definitely, those would have been like very expensive mistakes. So, I mean, that's one advice that I can pass on, I guess, is the market will wreck you. Basically, it's it plays on like the intuition of a huge number of people, right? And somehow it manages to fool almost everyone.
God damn it, Kyle! It's all Kyle's fault.
I think Santiago's been tweeting a good bit, or maybe it's a tweet on repeat every now and then about time in the market being better than timing the market. And of course, like I know Cobie and I both do to some degree, attempt to time the market, but it does seem like if you do have that time in the market, eventually it's just going to add up to enough to where like some good opportunities came across, and you just have to like sit there and sit on your hands for a bit and kind of let those good opportunities ride out. And like this is that wave where that's really, those are really presenting themselves significantly, like with the layer one trades going on, the DeFi trades that went on, to where if you took their 20-30% gain, like it just would not have been worth the wait. But if you just like ape in and hold on for dear life, some of those are going to be life-changing.
Yeah, I mean, look at like what Konstantin did, for example, right? I mean, like he probably has like the highest return per number of trades ratio in probably the history of mankind, right?
What I've noticed about Constantine is he also rotates at the exact perfect time. I mean, I won't say the assets, but in like, I don't know if it was like January or February or something, he was like, messaged me like, I've got an OTC trade, I'm selling this thing for this other thing. Do you want to join me? And then I was like, nah, I'm gonna just leave everything. I've made my allocations, I'll just wait. I looked back at the chart the other day, it was the absolute top. I was like, what? It's like it was an asset that's not synced up with the rest of the market as well. So like that particular asset topped and everything else didn't. I was like, how does he do this? It doesn't make sense. He just held for 7 years and then sold it at the absolute top. It's what the fuck?
Yeah, how? Some kind of black magic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree. I think like, you know, for 90, 95, 98, 99, I don't know, % of people, just holding and forgetting is like a far superior strategy, because every time otherwise you make a lot of decisions, right? And there's a margin for error, there's a margin for human error. And the more decisions you have to make, or you force yourself to make, the more times you can get it wrong. Whereas if you just buy and hold, you've made one decision, and like, you know, crypto's gone up basically forever. So historically it's been a pretty good call. So you make one decision, you keep it really simple for yourself. Whereas if like every day you're deciding like, shall I sell today? And then after you've sold, you're like, fuck, did I make the correct decision? Do I buy now? It's gone up a little bit. Like there's so many chances to be wrong. And I think people are not very good at that. And I think often in crypto, people are trading with like their entire net worth as well, which makes mistakes feel very costly, which gets in people's heads, which makes it even harder. But personally, I can't stomach the like minus 85% drawdown. Like ETH went from like 1,500 to like 80. I can't be just like, fair play if you can do this, but I can't sit there through the drop to 80 and like remain like high conviction and be like, don't worry, only 2.5 years to be back to break even. It's like, because I want to be there like deploying at the bottom, and I want to be like, you know, and if people don't do that, they might not even bottom, because because the market's just Sue and like 5 other people. So if some people don't sell, then who's going to buy?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. If I knew how to do it, like I had strong like trust that I can do it, and you have that, you built that over like many years, then I'd probably do the same.
So how do you create exits or make decisions for reallocating your portfolio so that you can have new entries on new things, or use a little bit of money for life, or whatever kind of, you know, whatever's next?
I would say, going back to the previous question, there's probably like 2 more like 100 IQ answers that I would like amend, and some maybe like the most basic stuff for your listeners. But one is definitely like fees and taxes. So whenever you trade from A to B, you're going to realize gains, and after that you already sort of have to subtract that money from your bankroll, and you're going to trade from a lower base. You have to make more returns on the new asset to even get to break even than if you just had it. So that's a big one. People can also rack up sort of liabilities to their, you know, to their government, to their tax office without even realizing it. And that's actually the same as the second point, which is leverage. So be very careful with that. You can... Well, trading on leverage is super dangerous, basically in any kind of market, because it creates a lot of convexity, and especially, for example, if you like use Bitcoin as collateral to borrow more dollars to buy more Bitcoin, then basically if Bitcoin ever goes down, then just you get super wrecked, and I mean you could end up like with far less than if you just had, and I think it's almost never worth the risk.
And for people to understand that, you're saying if your collateral is Bitcoin and then your position is Bitcoin, if both go down, you're losing on the position, but also your collateral base is shrinking. Therefore, your risk of liquidation is moving twice as fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And even if it's not Bitcoin, all these assets are super correlated anyway. Yeah. So if it's Bitcoin collateral, anything in crypto, virtually, they all go up and down together. I think it's like, I think everyone that comes on this show basically says don't use leverage. Like I think every guest that has done well in crypto has been like, don't trade leverage. But obviously leverage trading is super, super popular. And I imagine at least 50% of people that are listening to this have done it or do it. So I think a good like sort of meet you in the middle thing is just trade spot until you can like be like profitable over a significant period of time. Like if you can be profitable over the course of several months trading spot, then you like earn the badge. Like you can now trade leverage. You're allowed. And then if you're not profitable trading leverage for a series of months, then you lose the badge and you've got to trade spot again. I think unfortunately people just. Yeah, I think unfortunately people just over leverage very early and then they get completely wiped and they go, should have only traded spot maybe. But like it blows my mind that people that are not, they haven't proven to themselves that they're good at something yet, go straight for like the extreme stuff. Like I don't think there's many things where people would do that otherwise accept money. And I think it's just this like FOMO bull market thing.
Go ahead, Hasu.
No, in trying to understand sort of or get to this point, I also wrote an article about leverage actually, like a real primer together with Avi Fellman from Blocktor. He's a real beast, and he taught me a lot about leverage. And I guess I would like recommend everyone who feels like they have to trade or use leverage for whatever reason to read this primer, because I think it it just gives you a lot of useful mental models for how to think about it. Because when I even hear someone say, I'm using 10x leverage, like what does that even mean? So I mean, when I hear that, I already know that a person shouldn't be trading on leverage. It's as simple as that. Like even if I hear that and then say they're using 2x leverage, it doesn't matter, because whoever like even mentions sort of, I don't know, it's because they never mean like in relation to their bankroll, right? It's they never think of leverage as like in relation to their entire portfolio. They only mean it in relation to the collateral, but that could be like whatever percent of the bankroll. So the only thing that matters is sort of what is the size of your position relative to the size of your bankroll.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Your voice has gone a little bit robotic. I don't know if it's your internet connection. Ledger, are you hearing that as well?
Yeah, it's the internet connection, but that's okay.
I thought it was potentially mine, but maybe yours is bugging a little bit. But yeah, I think that makes sense. We'll put any links to stuff like this into the show notes. So
a couple of
any articles you want to share, we can stick in there. I want to move on a little bit. Oh, sorry, Ledger, were you going to ask something?
I was just going to say, if people just can't handle it and they have to like go somewhere where they're able to use leverage, the other thing is to just make sure you
use my ref link.
Type up only into the box. No, just that you got to Horcrux yourself in that case for sure. If you can blow up your entire net worth, if you lose on that position, like if you can't maintain your stops or you get liquidated, if you lose your entire net worth because you didn't have your money spread out amongst different places and your collateral was cross leveraged, whatever, you just can't do it that way. Like if you have to assume that you will not have control when it goes against you, and otherwise you'll die.
Never trust stops. Second, trade on a platform that has sub accounts, so something like FTX or Binance or whatever, so you can segregate your account and not have like all your collateral in one bucket where it can get liquidated. And trade on a platform that has partial liquidations. That's really important. So something like FTX, which has a really good liquidation engine, has circuit breakers. Because like you can just look at every kind of market move, fewer people are getting liquidated on FTX than anywhere else. And why? Because they just have better risk management.
Yeah, they've got a very forgiving engine. So I want to move on a little bit, and we've heard a little bit about how you got into crypto now, and what you've been up to, and you've sort of ended up in this space where like you're a serious person, right? Like your thoughts are on serious topics. It's not on price. It's not on speculation over like the market movements of particular assets or whatever. It's very much about like technical fundamental stuff, how stuff how stuff works, basically, in practice. What do you think are like some of the most interesting problem spaces in crypto today that people are not addressing, or people are addressing them, but they're just like complex and large, and there's no clear solution yet?
I've always thought that like a super interesting problem is like the security of public blockchains and how you ought to secure them. That's why I wrote like a paper on what happens to Bitcoin if the block subsidy goes away, because that's right now like 99.x+% of miner revenue, and that's where all the security comes from that you get when you make a transaction. And when that's gone, who's going to transact, and how secure your transaction is going to be. I think that's definitely one that's super important for all of crypto, and that's not really addressed for a variety of reasons. But apart from that, I think, especially like in all of the other fields where you don't have like this like strong dogma around the problem, I think all of the stuff has sort of solutions being in the works. So, I mean, MEV is like a super interesting topic. How can we basically protect people who use public blockchains from leaking money like to miners that they don't intend to leak? I think that's actually like my favorite definition of MEV. I don't really like sort of this definition that starts from the miner, because I like to frame I like to frame it directly in a way that shows us like, okay, how does the user suffer from this, and what is success is if we can make that number go down, right? So less people who trade on a DEX get sandwiched or get front run, or or if people who get liquidated on Aave or Compound, and basically they don't have to pay 12% penalty, right? But maybe they have to pay like a 2% penalty or 1% penalty, because there's an efficient auction going on between the people who try to liquidate them. So I think all of this is basically stuff that we have to seek to minimize as much as possible. And some of the smartest people in all of crypto, I think, are working on this topic right now.
We're getting rugged by your audio, but I was still able to hear that if I concentrated.
Ledger concentration. It was his entire concentration span. It was like, all right, 3 more seconds, we can make it to the end of this sentence.
I don't know that everybody knows what MEV is, and then also where MEV is most likely to occur. The most likely to occur one, like I have a lot of questions about that personally, but in terms of what it is, I think an example would be really helpful. So like one of the really common ones is just like a sandwich attack or something similar, where if you have a slippage tolerance in your DEX and say it's 5%, then while your trade is essentially pending within a block, someone can identify it and say, ooh, well, I can sneak a trade into that block and get ahead of you and take up 3% of that slippage and essentially do a round trip trade before yours ever confirms. And you'll be guaranteed to get the full 5% slippage that you allowed in the DEX. And they end up capturing, I don't know, $1,000 profit in that transaction. So that's right. That's an example of MEV, where somebody goes in and takes advantage of either someone's settings or the way that a protocol is processing transactions or something like that to achieve revenue inside those blocks.
Yeah, that's I think the example that most people are going to be familiar with, and that most of them would probably encounter.
Hasu, your internet connection is now so terrible, you sound like a dial-up sound.
That's so weird. I never have internet problems. Let me connect my phone. Okay, let's try that one.
Are you if you're behind a VPN or anything like that, or if you can reconnect, that would be good.
I think he said he's going to reconnect, but it sounded like, in the Matrix when you go down Neo's throat. Yeah. Did it just zoom in on me because he left?
Yeah, I had you.
Just
pinned.
My head now.
I had you pinned, and now you're framed actually even better. So Hasu's gone. It's just you and I. I didn't realize that Hasu was a 2018 entrant, and it makes me feel dumber and poorer and less effective as a crypto participant.
Don't say that, mate. It might be true, but you don't have to think it. That's just a negative thought pattern.
I was like, clearly,
just push that out of your head. Everyone's going to make
been
it.
Thinking about crypto since like 2014 or 2015, something like that.
Do you reckon that when ETH moves to proof of stake, they'll change the name of MEV to VEV?
VEV. What's that one stand for?
Will there be no miners anymore, will there? Yeah, there'll be validators.
Yeah, they should. I mean, there's a lot of those terms that don't really matter anymore that we still use. Like, I don't have any on hand. It's pretty dumb today. Still struggling from my drinks last night. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I need to ask him this when he comes back on, but a lot of chains advocate that they don't even have like MEV, like it's MEV protection out of the box, whether they're faster or cheaper, I don't know. But
look, he's the perfect person to ask because, as you know, neither of us know anything about crypto.
we're just like the rotator meme.
Yeah.
What do you think about this cycle of memes, the rotator, and there's someone came out with the Ledger one today, which
the Ledger one's quite good, I thought. Yeah. I like the Enjoyer. The Enjoyer is cool. I actually think they're pretty funny, but I think they're going to get tiring soon. I think they're going to start getting self-referential soon and then tiring.
They're better than the Slurper.
Yeah, the slurping the Dipperino was that was the low point, I think, in crypto memes. Yeah. It was a real low point, I think. Did you see? You did that weird tongue thing at the start of this episode. Have you seen what they've created of you?
It?
It's really good. It's really good, mate.
I'm definitely not going to put it on here. Has he messaged you, or are we just going to...
Yeah, he's just sorting out with his phone.
Okay.
I retweeted it from up only.
Oh, thank you. What's your hat say? 24.
It says A24, right? And it is a gift from someone that watches this show, but he doesn't know what you look like because he only listens to it on on a podcast version when he's walking his dog on Saturdays. He's called Ravi. Shout out to Ravi. He runs television at this place, and he sent me some gifts. You got nothing. But
classic.
I got some gifts.
I spent 10 minutes thinking it said happy hour, so I'm gonna need a refund on my eyes.
Look, here's the one for you.
Awesome. Now I want to have this as happy hour. I want a happy hour hat.
Kept this one.
Hey guys,
Hasu, you're back.
Oh, he's back.
We spent the time while you're gone talking about absolutely nothing because we realized we don't know very much.
How is my audio and my connection? Is it any better?
It sounds significantly better.
Yeah,
nice. That's good.
It's perfect.
We had MEV questions.
Yeah. So I don't even remember what we're talking about now. The first, while Ledger remembers the serious question, when we move to proof of stake on Ethereum, are they going to stop calling it MEV? Are they going to call it VEV?
Yeah, good question. They've tried to rebrand MEV to mean maximum extractable value instead of minor extractable value. I think that's like an ongoing initiative. I don't really like the name, to be honest, because extractable by whom, right? I think consensus extractable value would be better, or like time ordering extractable value or something. Because SEV or VEV was, we need something more general, I think.
Look, we can start a movement to call it something. We just need to decide what we're gonna push for. We can make it work.
Your podcast co-host, he coined the super cycle on this show. You can coin MEV. You can do it. You can rename MEV right now if you have it on the top of your head.
Yeah. So what you were saying, Ledger, you were asking about MEV chains.
Yeah, I was poorly mansplaining MEV in front of a guest who knows a lot about MEV. So I guess my better question is, I guess a lot of people know it exists and it's prevalent on Ethereum. So number one is, how can it be solved on Ethereum? And number two, is this as big of a risk on other chains, particularly with like more transactions per second and all that kind of stuff?
I think the second is a bit easier to answer. I think generally, like latency, for example, or more throughput doesn't really solve MEV at all. I think, at least that's my current perspective. For example, on a chain with like very low latency, for example, or very small blocks or whatever, MEV just takes a different form. It becomes more similar to like the classical high frequency trading business that you see on, in the traditional finance landscape. Instead of in Ethereum, it's a bit different. When you have only one block every 13 seconds, then basically the auction for the order takes a different shape. It turns into like a market where people bid for a particular position in that block and pay to get that specific position. And that's sort of what Flashbots has done, right? Is introduce a new transaction type where you can like say exactly where you want to be in the block and like make a blind bid on that spot, right? But if there's a financial value to being like behind or before a certain transaction or very early in a block, then people will always spend up to that amount of money to get it. And it's just a matter of what shape that spending takes and how many negative externalities it produces.
Seems like a tremendous amount of brain power to what inevitably just gets reduced down to like the minimum amount of reward to make all that worth it. Like there's a lot of programming talent, a lot of compute resources that go into this. And it's like, okay, well, this was great. I made $1,000. And then two people go in and like, okay, well, now I can only make 800. And it goes all the way down until you are, you create the problem like you do on Ethereum layer 1, where it affects all the users, but then they're like scraping together, $50 a profit. It just seems like something's fundamentally broken there.
I don't know if it's broken. I mean, it in some way it resembles mining itself, right? It's when you create a public incentive, then people are going to spend money in order to get it, and then the process of doing so, they will compete with each other and drive down the margins. And in some regards, we would say that's really good. For example, like in mining, we want miners to spend as much resources as possible because that's what creates the chain security, right? And also ensures that the miners themselves have very low margin for misbehavior, right? They have to play exactly according to the rules. Otherwise, they would not make as much money. And you cannot have a miner that has a really like strong strategic position relative to other miners when the margins are small. If you have one that has like 100% margin or whatever, and everyone else is like 10%, then that one, they can exert a lot of control over everyone else and the users, and you don't want that. So you want margins to be really low. And in the context of Bitcoin, it's also sort of easy to understand because Bitcoin is often described as like a network without like seigniorage, right? Where every coin is like fairly minted. But in practice, there is still seigniorage. Basically, new coins are created every block and the miners get them first. And they don't pay like the fair value of the coins, but they pay something that's very close to it. And so via the competition, they drive down the seigniorage to like basically the lowest amount that the market tolerates. So that's good. And yeah.
I'd love to. So it seems like this problem space is like, I don't know if you tweeted it. I saw a tweet the other day that said something like, there's enough material for like 100 PhDs in like the MEV space at the moment, like stuff people's working on. There's just so much stuff to figure out. There's so much like theoretical stuff that's like sort of unexplored. Flashbots are obviously like, I guess sort of the flagship name working on MEV. I imagine most people know the name Flashbots and don't know what the fuck they do, because that's what I was like for
me in.
a very long time. And then there are, I guess, contentious projects such as Eden, which a lot of people say is like a bad for Ethereum. There seems to be like some kind of I guess intellectual war going on there.
I realized about 2 days ago that's the renaming of Archer DAO. Eden?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then there's OpenMeV, which I think is actually the name that you said Flashbots should be called, which has been co-opted by Manifold, which is doing, I guess, a similar product to both of those. Are there any other like big, well-known teams that are working on this, or is it like solo researchers? Like I follow MEV in turn, but like, what are the sort of hubs of progress on MEV?
That's a good question. I think Flashbots and Eden are basically more like infrastructure providers. So they're more like the layer 0 of MEV extraction. So I think for anyone who doesn't know, I think Flashbots is easier to explain. Flashbots is basically, it's almost like a fork of Ethereum, like the client anyway. It's something that the miners can use, but that's still compatible with the rest of Ethereum. So it's like more like a soft fork in that regard. And it adds a new transaction type. It's like a private memory pool, so a private waiting area for transactions that people can send transactions to, and they can express better control over where they want that transaction to be in the block. And a couple other nice properties, like you can bundle transactions together. So you can take someone else's transaction and you can put your own transaction right after it or right before it or both. And this new transaction type called a bundle, it guarantees that it's only going to be executed all at once or not at all. So you can't have like one half of your transaction executed and the other isn't, basically. And so that's very useful for like a variety of reasons. And there's like a last big benefit, and that is that the transactions are actually private until they land on chain, until they are mined. And so if you as a user were to use Flashbots and like make your Uniswap trade via Flashbots, then in theory it doesn't even matter if you set your slippage tolerance at like 5%. Because if it's private before it lands on chain, then there's no way to exploit that. Unless, and that's something that we've seen before, for example, if the block gets uncled. So a block gets on chain, it's like part of the main chain, but then there's like another fork that like takes over and the old block becomes orphaned, and then your transaction could go back into the mempool and somebody could sandwich it there. So definitely still good to use like a reasonable slippage tolerance, but in theory that's sort of something that like privacy on your transactions gives you.
I imagine a bunch of people in chat are listeners, because our audience, they're not used to this content. They're just used to like, tell me what token to buy kind of shit. So I imagine they're thinking like, right, this Flashbots thing, Hasu, he seems smart. He's talked about Flashbots. I've heard of Flashbots before. I'm going to buy the Flashbots token right now. Can they do that?
Nope, there's no Flashbots token right now. And as far as I know, no immediate plans or launching one.
Sorry, chat. You can't buy nothing.
Was an example of Flashbots in use when the punk floor got swept for like 80 punks. So they like did all those transactions and batched them and threw them all in Flashbots so that some people essentially couldn't run in front of that floor sweep.
Not Flashbots, I think, but another project that has like a somewhat similar purpose. It's called Mining DAO. And what they do is basically they work with mining pools and they sell like blocks wholesale, pretty much. So they tell you, well, you can have this entire block and do whatever you want with it. And they help you program, like write the transactions that you want in order to make like the block most useful to you. So what they did in this case is like wrote a whole lot of transactions that like swept the entire punk floor and executed them all at once. Because if you want to make a lot of transactions like that, like if you want to like like wipe a floor, then you can't execute like half of them and then one block later execute the other half, because then by that point somebody will know, oh, he's probably going to buy more, or like they have already like increased the floor price. So we have to like now all compete to buy this thing up, right, and arbitrage it, and then you get a much worse price. So you get like basically front run hardcore. So you want to avoid that. You want to execute, if possible, all your transactions at once, so you can get the old price.
Yeah, fair enough. And then the Eden debate, there's been a lot of this is bad for Ethereum. This is back and forth. People like figuring out. I think there was a patch of some ETH mining client so that you could like scam Eden blocks or some shit. I haven't really been keeping up with it too much because like I'm not as smart as you. Can you give us like a high level summary of like what's going on there, and then also like what is your opinion?
Yeah, so in Flashbots the way it works is you have basically three parties. You have the miners who use the Flashbots client, and then you have searchers. Searchers are those who basically search for MEV, they create the transactions, submit them as a bundle, and then the miners include them, right? But they only include sort of the highest bits. So the searchers basically add bits to their bundles, and that's how the miners make money. And usually it works. The way it works is like the miners make like 90 to 95% of the opportunity, because the searchers actually bid against each other, but only one miner wins the block. So the miner is always sort of the monopoly, and the others are, or like the miner is always like they're only themselves, and the other people have to bid against each other. And so you end up with a very high value going to the searcher. And the way it's sort of different in Eden is that the miners who participate, so you can imagine it's also like a separate client, or like in that regard, it's very similar to Flashbots. But the way it works is actually the Eden miners give up the valuable block space, and they give it to Eden, basically. So they sign up and, hey, I give you this very valuable block space. And as in return, you get some number of Eden tokens from me, like every week, let's say. And it's actually a fairly unpredictable amount. And also the value of the opportunity cost of giving up these super valuable blocks or slots in the block is also very unpredictable. And on top of that, sort of like, I think it's like 20 or 30% of all Eden tokens that get minted actually go to like the team and like other incentives, but not to the miners anyway. So it's it feels like a bit of like a convoluted way. Like the Flashbots market structure is very easy to understand, right? It's just you have the searchers paying the miners, and it's like the miners get like 90 to 95% of the MEV. But Eden is like deliberately, whether deliberately or not, I'm not really sure, but it's definitely more convoluted and like a lot harder to understand. Also, like for the miners and basically for all participants. So I mean, like in that sense, it just seems less efficient. But of course, and that's where you get to Ledger's question. It gives people like a way to speculate on MEV, right? There is a huge vacuum in the market that is also created by Flashbots not having a token, or like there not being like any other like good competitors to it, where people think, well, everybody talks about MEV all the time. Like people tell me on podcasts that the smartest people in this space are working on MEV right now, and it's like super important. So obviously, I need to have exposure to this, or at least like let me make something that people can invest in so they can have exposure to this. And I think it's like completely predictable that like Eden would be doing well, like in hindsight.
Plus Eden's a good name, isn't it? Eden, yeah. Sounds nice.
Yeah, it's much better than Achadao, right?
Yeah. Somebody tried to make me sound smart by giving me a question to ask you and pretending that it came from me, but I wouldn't even be able to get away with reading it. It has something to do with the app-specific chain paradigm for MEV minimization. So I guess this is kind of like what Cosmos does, or like what rollups accomplish. So they say, limiting the problem space by limiting synchronous composability would constrain a lot of malicious MEV. I couldn't pretend.
Imagine if you just done this question and you just gone, so I've been wondering.
I sat there for like a minute thinking, can I do this? And I just lost confidence in myself. But don't mind me. They gave me this softball and I still knew I would whiff. So don't mind me ask this question. Could you address this concept?
So what? Okay, synchronous composability.
I don't really know. Words.
I can say something about like application specific chains, because there is a lot that you can do. I would say if you can design your own blockchain, and that's sort of the reason we have application specific chains, right? There's two reasons.
Those? Is that like Polkadot and Cosmos? Are those the big ones doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I generally like to like combine all of this under like some people call it like app chains. I tend to call it like state buckets, because that's really like two benefits. A is sort of, when you have Ethereum, like you have this one huge blob of state, and every node needs to sort of keep up with that and validate that, and it's just very expensive, right? And Solana is like the even more extreme version of that. But then on the other extreme, you have something like a chain that has sharding, for example, where you have 100 blockchains, they all can talk to each other. And that's sort of the vision for ETH2, for Polkadot, for Cosmos. And people only need to run nodes for basically those chains that are actually on and that they do something on, where they have assets and where they want to use applications. So that's one benefit. Sort of, it lets you like separate the state and only really like validate what you want to use. But second is you can create a chain that has exactly the properties that you want as an application, whether that's like high throughput, whether it's like proof of work, proof of stake, can be like that. You can do whatever you want basically with the chain, fast blocks, slow blocks. And there's definitely some things that you can do in order to mitigate MEV more. So for example, if you had complete privacy, like before blocks land on chain, and you could definitely mitigate transactions land on chain, and you could definitely mitigate certain forms of MEV, right? Anything that basically requires someone to see a transaction, right, in order to attack it. Other forms of MEV could not be targeted with that. So if you if the last price on the blockchain and like on a known block is like ETH is at $2,000, but then on Coinbase it moves to like 2,100, then there will still be a race in order to, who can be the first to get the transaction mined that actually arbitrages the whatever blockchain like you're on to also be like at 2,100. So it's only, you will only ever be able to do this for like some forms of MEV, basically.
The goal in that scenario would be like the price of Ethereum's different on all these places, so you go and you participate on dexes where you can arbitrage that somehow, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you would send the arbitrage transactions to the different decentralized exchanges where they are still quoting the old price.
This is where someone in the chat just starts spamming Chainlink.
Yeah, Chainlink. This is maybe, I don't know. Chainlink actually is sitting on this like insane opportunity, and I'm sure there will be a day when they will grab it. But Chainlink is basically in the position to almost do all arbitrage, not on the decentralized exchange, but basically everywhere else. Everything that's not like a decentralized exchange, Chainlink is the one who is going to be able to arbitrage it, which is kind of crazy to think about it. Why? Because they are the ones who control the oracle, and they know when they make the transaction, they can be the ones bundling their oracle updates with an arbitrage transaction in order to immediately like catch up the blockchain state to what their oracle update says. So like on a lending market that uses Chainlink oracles, nobody should ever be able to liquidate someone who is not Chainlink if Chainlink wants that. So Chainlink is in the prime position to do all arbitrage that's somehow waiting for an oracle update in all of DeFi. And that's kind of crazy.
Are they like doing this, or is like, should you be launching a Chainlink competitor right now and try and do this yourself?
Or is this like a don't be evil thing? Like if they do that, then they're preventing their ecosystem participants from taking part.
Yeah, how do you think people would react to that? Like, what is the reason that they haven't started doing this? It's
What Chainlink? They it don't matter if people react because they've got an army of people with frogs that are going to come. You can't say anything bad about Chainlink. It don't matter if you say bad stuff about Chainlink. They attack you. They encourage you to stop saying bad things.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. It's I mean, it's definitely like just posting the Oracle updates is already very powerful, right? But if you are also the one financially benefiting from every update, like that's kind of crazy, and also creates like further incentives in order, like maybe to make updates that may not be as accurate. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
That
it
makes
might.
sense. Someone in the chat just said, Tart Monkey said, Hasu's voice is so calming. I think I'm going to start listening to clips of him talking to fall asleep at night. Do you want to
Hasu
record a little
ASMR.
clip for Tart Monkey, just like to tell him a little bedtime story or something?
Hey, Card Monkey, have a good night. Sleep well.
That was good.
That was quite good. That was quite good. So the last thing I want to talk about on MEV before moving on a little bit, I guess two questions. So one is you said everyone's allocated to Eden. Is there a better way to allocate, an alternative way? Maybe that's not Eden, or like if you were the people watching, what sort of things would you be thinking about with regards to MEV? What sort of stuff would you be taking into consideration?
MEV, that's sort of the problem. It's nothing that I can really recommend to allocate to. And I mean, I said a bunch of like not so good stuff about Eden. I should also say some good stuff for Balance, I think. So it's something that Eden definitely was faster at than Flashbots. So, I mean, it's quite easy for them because they just forked Flashbots, and it's always easier for sort of the second mover to do certain things. But they created like a private RPC endpoint that you can connect your MetaMask to, and if you stake 100 Eden and you connect your MetaMask, which people are already very used to this workflow, right? From using a Binance Smart Chain and Polygon and a bunch of other EVM compatible chains. So everybody knows how to do this. And they allowed basically people to use to use Eden just via their MetaMask. And Flashbots did not do that. Like Flashbots required much more technical knowledge in order to submit a transaction to them. And in that regard, I would say if Eden offered something that Flashbots didn't, and hence had like justified basically place in the market, at least for like smaller users who wanted like pre-trade privacy. I think in that sense, have to give them a shout out. That's definitely a feature that's useful for people, and that's also like well executed because it was quite easy to use.
All right.
And then, well, I in terms of allocation, I don't really have anything strongly in mind. I mean, every application, I mean, Chainlink is definitely in the position to extract a lot of MEV. That's something we talked about. In theory, every application is in a position to protect their users from MEV better than they are doing today. I think decentralized exchanges could do a far better job. Lending markets could do a far better job. And now we're seeing like some markets, basically Maker, but also something that I backed recently. They're using like better auction mechanisms. Basically, they do this like they don't have like this fixed punishment basically when you get liquidated, but instead the keepers engage in like a multi-block bidding war and sort of drive up the price of your collateral, and so your punishment is much lower. So stuff like that, I think. And then the question is sort of how basically who's going to capture that surplus, right? Is it all going to the creator, like to make the transaction, or is some of it going to be captured by the market, by the lending market, for example? I think the answer is probably like a mix of both. And so if you're exposed, like if you have exposure to something like Aave, Compound, and so on, then I think as they learn how to minimize MEV better, I think you already have like implicitly some exposure to that. So that's pretty cool. And the only last one I would mention is probably the wallets. I think the wallets are maybe in the best position to protect their users from MEV. For example, something like MetaMask or Argent, or I don't know what else is out there. Gnosis safe, definitely. I think everything that uses sort of a relayer, what they can do is they can do the same basically that OpenMev X manifold does. So they can always check if your transaction will create MEV. They can like run local simulations. And if it does, then they can bundle your transaction with a transaction that directly extracts the MEV and hence captures it for you, the user. And then they can split that surplus with you. Or
I didn't
give
realize
it all
that's how those work. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that would be, I mean, that's like that isn't really sort of preventing MEV, but at least it captures it for the user. So I think we can get the MEV that we as users lead to the miners and to the searchers, we can minimize like that by like 90% just by using sort of all of these band-aids that we discussed in the last half hour.
Yeah, when you said DEXs and places should be protecting their users more or optimizing better for like MEV leakage or whatever, I guess, how should they be doing that? Are there like products and tools being built that they should be integrating faster? Should they be doing stuff by themselves? Should they be like looking at like, okay, how are we losing our users or like losing money for our users? What are the biggest MEV leaks in our product? And therefore, what can we build? Like, what should they be doing, do you reckon?
Man, there's actually so much to talk about there.
Could you just condense like 50 episodes into
I give you like
you also have to talk to two morons.
I give you one very obvious example. 1inch for like the first year of their existence had a default slippage tolerance of 3%. I mean, let that sink in. So I don't know how much money that lost their users, but it must be like an absurd amount.
Yeah, FUD.
Uniswap had like 1% or whatever. I mean, for like a long time. And all DEXs had like 1% for a long time. I think just understanding like how the defaults that you tell your users sort of put them at risk, I think is already a very big one. Then Uniswap, SushiSwap is, I think has like had integrated like ArcherDAO and then integrated like OpenMev, and what they do is sort of they check if a user's trade can be backrun. That's what I said the wallet should be doing as well. And if it does, then they can give the user like a kickback on their trade. So that's good. What else can they do? They could submit transactions automatically to Eden or to Flashbots, so they are private. So unless there's like an uncle, they cannot get front run. I think those are like already some pretty good ways to protect your users. What else? So if basically how easily you can get sandwiched is directly like a function of your price impact, right? So if you're someone who goes to Uniswap because, I mean, you like unicorns, but you're not that sophisticated, so you don't know, you could be using an aggregator to check like prices across a bunch of different markets. So you end up using Uniswap. And you get a very bad price because there's a SushiSwap pool that had much more liquidity actually for that, like, or a Bancor pool or whatever. I mean, I'm kind of on the fence about this, but I think that Uniswap should actually give you the better price. I think Uniswap should be giving you the better price of like SushiSwap, whatever. I think it would be much, much better because then you could tell people, just trade on like Uniswap. You get either you get the best price or like you definitely get the best price. Either it's like from Uniswap or like from a competitor.
That's why I've always.
So Uniswap should basically also be an aggregator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think every DEX should be also an aggregator.
That's why I've always used Matcha when I just because they did the aggregation for me, like partial fills in different places if that was advantageous, and they also.
Isn't it bad though?
Matcha? Why? Like their fills.
Don't they produce like inefficient routes? Because I always compare it to like Paraswap, 1inch, Curve, and Matcha if I'm doing something like big. And Matcha always seems to be kind of expensive.
There's probably a sweet spot where like someone not very rich like me, it works great. So like if you're making 6-figure transactions, maybe it's better than if you're making 8-figure transactions is my guess. But I don't know. I mean, like It probably depends on users. I know for like the average person, they've done a lot of studies to say like they have pretty good matching, but still for the average person, kind of what theirs is a bit of a chicken and egg thing. The average person, ETH layer 1's just not an appropriate place to trade, you know?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
What I do like about Matra is they have that OTC thing. I don't know how it works, but you can like do OTC trades. It's only on like 4 pairs or something, and it's like really big liquid pairs. But
if you're doing BTC to ETH or something, or like WBTC to ETH, it's pretty epic.
Yeah,
Well, doesn't Matcha route exclusively to off-chain market makers?
On OTC, I think it does,
Yeah.
but not exclusively otherwise.
Okay.
All right. My last question on MEV, I promise. When we move to proof of stake, how does the MEV landscape change? And like specifically, I want to talk about how like pools that have like a decent chance of proposing a block can work together to, I guess, increase staking APY by paying MEV to people that stake with that pool, and like how that plays out, and how you think, like, what do you think the most important things about this sort of dynamic are going to be, and also if it's good or bad. We should probably also do disclaimers, like Hasu is an investor in Lido. I
This is the
helped
part
build
of the show
Lido.
where they're going to talk about Lido and how it's the best product ever.
Just in case it comes up, we've got to talk. We've got to say it in advance.
Incentivized.
Yeah, just in case. We've got to do our old disclosures so we don't go to jail, because I wouldn't do very well in jail.
So I think I would say probably most people overcomplicate this topic. So I mean, when we move to proof of stake, then all the money that miners make today will go to stakers, right? And that includes like there's actually some new rewards, but they don't really matter. Like in proof of stake, you get paid to attest as well to other people's block when it's not your turn. Whereas in proof of work, you only get paid to propose basically a block. And so in proof of stake, you still get like the transaction fees, you get the subsidy, and you get paid when you attest to someone else's block. And as part of sort of those fees and so on, you also get the MEV. And I think that dynamic won't really change past like when we are in proof of stake. I think something like Lido, but like all of the like staking pools, but also the solo stakers, the exchanges, someone like Lido and the people who they delegate to will all still be in competition to extract the most MEV that they can, because that's how they get ahead. Like they want to make the most money they can, and so they will try to increase the amount of MEV that they can capture. I think where it gets interesting is sort of how much of that is getting passed on, and it's a bit of a similar dynamic to how the mining pools used to exploit their miners, because the mining pools used to have their miners, mine on a block, and then they would pay them, but the miner might not really understand like what they are getting paid for and how much they are owed. And so for a long time, mining pools were not honest about how much money they actually made, especially from MEV, and didn't compensate the miners fairly for it. And I think that's definitely a big problem. And if you want to hear something spicy,
I love spicy.
Some people have pointed out that some mining pools might also not pay forward their Eden rewards. So that might be one. that might be one piece of the puzzle why mining pools might want to use that, because it basically allows them to get paid off chain.
All right, Eden.
It's not as spicy as the story you told me before the episode started that I'm not allowed to repeat. No one's not allowed to tweet it. Fine.
That was a good one.
Okay, Eden
spicier.
bag holders, we're here to FUD your positions. I'm getting trolled in chat for calling 6-figure transactions not very rich on ETH Layer 1. I don't make the rules. Suzu's the one that came on this show and said, if you only have $100,000 and you're trading on ETH Layer 1 for a year, you will go broke. I think that's a relative truth if you actively transact on ETH Layer 1. So sorry for saying that, but it's.
I mean, most people that are watching us, they go broke if they're using Solana, or it don't matter. You can use a centralized exchange, just transact free, or they go broke.
It's
Come
not
on.
the fees that make them go broke.
Yeah. If you're making losing trades, don't matter how much the fees costed you.
Did you see when Sue made this announcement tweet for like the Avalanche investment, and he wrote like we invested like $0.2 billion or something.
I have a feeling that two people in their DMs really enjoy that joke about the decimals.
I'm in a Telegram chat where the only way you're allowed to talk about money is to use the billion denomination. So if you're like, yeah, it's like 0.00003. That's how you got to talk. Otherwise, you get kicked out.
My net worth is not even a rounding error in such a chat.
All right, so we spoke a bunch about MEV. I want to talk a little bit about the Bitcoin security and issuance stuff that you mentioned, because I saw you did a paper on it. Was it in like 2019?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of cropped up again as a topic recently. I saw DC Investor chatting about it on Twitter the other day. And, you know, Udi goes, it don't matter because it's like 100 years away. But then there's also like an infographic that shows if, you know, what the price appreciation or what the market cap needs to be for like chain security to remain at least stable or at least constant over the next however many years. Can you give us like a high level summary? Should people be worrying about this, or is it some kind of false moral panic or whatever Udi said it was?
So let's see. So when does it matter? Definitely not in 100 years. So Bitcoin's block subsidy halves every 4 years. So when did it last half? 2 years ago? I think so, right? Mm-hmm. So in 2 years, we'll halve again to like, where is it right now? 1.9%? Something like that, right?
We don't know. We don't know.
In 2 years, it'll be like around 1%.
7 BTC or something.
In 6 years, it will be like 0.45%. And by percent, I mean like in terms of like stock to flow ratio, basically, to give them also a shout out. So basically the stock of like new Bitcoins issued to compared to like the existing ones. So that number gets like smaller and smaller. Definitely like in like 10 or 12 years, it'll be like below like 0.1% stock to flow ratio. And I mean, that's not very high. I mean, basically you have to ask where does the security come from? Like this fact that like you can say I make a Bitcoin transaction and like I wait 2 or 3 confirmations and I have like a pretty strong feeling. And the thing is, it will always take 2 confirmations. Will always take about 20 minutes because of the difficulty adjustment. But it might end up being like more a situation with like an Ethereum Classic or like
I was about to say that's Ethereum
Bitcoin
Classic
Satoshi's vision. Yeah, exactly. Where like Coinbase all of a sudden says, sorry, I mean, you can deposit your ETC, but it takes 2 weeks before you can trade with it. Why? Because we are never really sure that we actually own it, because it is so cheap to reorganize Ethereum Classic that like we just cannot accept like a 50K deposit. Sorry, we have to wait for like enough work to stack on top of this transaction before we consider it as final. And that's something, you know, that you have only on Bitcoin and not on many other chains. Like Cosmos, for example, has finality every block. So you cannot reorganize Cosmos, for example, but at the same time, it has other like downsides. So if somebody like, if there's like a disagreement about what like the next block should be, then the blockchain basically halts. So Bitcoin is like, it always keeps going, but you're never really sure how safe you are and your transaction is. And so I would definitely say like you can already point to examples today of where people have stopped using chains that have like a very low security budget. And it's not a nice thing. I mean, yeah, those coins live on centralized exchanges. People still speculate on them. It doesn't prevent like a Barry Silbert from shilling them on TV, but it doesn't mean that they're any good for transacting or for storing your value, for that matter. And definitely not as like a state-resistant non-sovereign money. And so I think we can. There's probably like I would say there's some agreement, like among everyone who's like remotely interested in this topic, that we need some amount of like security budget that we pay to miners. But there's like a lot of disagreement over where it should come from, right? So basically what Satoshi wanted was, or what he said is at some point transaction fees, like there will be so much demand to use Bitcoin because of course it will start maybe as a collectible, as like gold, but at some point we'll do all of our transactions with Bitcoin. And then there will be like so much demand to use it that of course transaction fees will be like in the high hundreds to thousands of dollars. And then, I mean, the miners will also make a lot of money, and that means there will be a lot of work in every block. And then transactions will be very secure. But in practice, we haven't seen any of that.
So essentially, like Lightning would have to be extremely successful so that all those layer 2 transactions roll back down to the main chain, and you keep layer 1 busy in order for...
Wait, is that how Lightning works?
I don't know. Just throwing it out there. Why do you guys
so Lightning?
Like that,
how much do you know about Lightning? How much do you know about Lightning?
Like very little, but I didn't think that the transactions like rolled back to layer 1. I thought you opened like a channel, everything happened within the channel, and then it just settled at the end.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's still...
Hey!
I mean, you're both right. I mean,
yeah,
it's
still,
like a...
that transaction still has to like end up on the layer 1 chain, or else the security model for Lightning is not based on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
not every single thing that happens in the channel, no? You
don't necessarily have to settle it. It's just the fact that you can settle it that's basically giving you the security. So it's like a shared wallet basically. A channel is just a shared wallet between like 2 or more people, and either of them can like unilaterally close it at all times. But when you want like more liquidity in a channel, or you open a channel to someone new, or you want to close it, then you have to make these on-chain transactions.
Their liquidity stuff seems like a disaster to me, or at least it was when I last used Lightning a long time ago. But to the question initially, does a lot of use of Lightning, like, I mean, just today there was news about Twitter enabling Lightning for transactions. Does that have to be realized in order for the security model to last on Bitcoin?
I would say, yeah. I think that's really important. Unless we find like other stuff, other ways to pay miners, right? Something like Drive Chain, that's like side chains for Bitcoin that are like secured by hash power. So basically Bitcoin miners would custody coins on other chains, like Bitcoin and other blockchains that has like other properties. Like for example, like an EVM compatible Bitcoin blockchain, or like one that's completely private, that has like zero knowledge technology, stuff like that, right? And that's also something that can generate fees to miners. What else? I mean, a bunch of stuff that hasn't been invented yet, but I mean, for stuff that hasn't been invented yet, I'm always really skeptical because of like how slow moving Bitcoin is and how unlikely it seems that we'll ever see like any large change to it. There used to be like a period of many years where people said everything that's invented like in altcoins will eventually make it into Bitcoin. You know, you just need to see that it's any good. And, you know, that position is complete heresy now. Like we're more in the camp of like, we're never going to change Bitcoin again. So
y'all had I just want to shout out your podcast again. One, it's very, very good. Two, y'all had an episode about Bitcoin where I appreciate that you're willing to talk on these like third rail type subjects amongst Bitcoiners, so like changing the chain or hard forking or, you know, just game theory or hypothetical cases that could come up that I don't understand why more Bitcoiners aren't willing to have those conversations publicly. So y'all had an episode about that, right? Where you just kind of dug into kind of the game theory of the future of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been like super interested in this topic. I think it's sort of the result of how I came into the space, like this very long-term thinking and this crypto existentialism. It kind of forced you to take like a really long-term view, because when you're like deep in the bear market, you don't know, like you're never looking at the short term because you don't want to look at the short term. You're only looking at the long term. Always have like your eyes on the horizon. And I think for Bitcoin, it always struck me as like very obvious that it would run into problems at some point. just because the entire security model changes. Doesn't mean it can't work, but hey, let's at least acknowledge that like the entire way we pay miners is going to change. And right now, we don't know what the price of Bitcoin will be, and that's fine. But we know that right now, miners will make 2% of Bitcoin, like 2% of all Bitcoins per year, right? And in 4 years, or in 2 years, we know they will make like 1% of all Bitcoins per year. But in the future, we have no idea how many Bitcoin miners will make, or how many dollars for that matter, is because it depends entirely on like a secondary market that's at best is completely unrelated to it, which is the market for priority, like to get your transactions mined. And at worst, it's like an inversely correlated market. So if the chain security is low, then what does that do to the demand to transact? I think there's a very strong argument that it will actually go down, and hence there's like even less demand to transact, even less fees. So I think I haven't heard a convincing argument why we shouldn't be very worried about that.
Have you read Gavin's recent post about a potential Bitcoin future, which he says is very unlikely, but a nice thought experiment?
Yeah, I have.
Do you want to give a quick summary of it and also tell us your thoughts? How did you think about it? I'm also going to get another drink, but I got my headphones on so I can listen while I'm collecting.
Could you give me a drink while you're up?
I can try.
Okay, thanks.
To summarize, I think what Gavin wrote, I think he described a future where all Bitcoin would live on exchanges and other blockchains, right? And mainly bridges to those blockchains, right? So what does it mean for like a Bitcoin to live on another blockchain? If we take like the example of, let's say like a REN BTC, it's like a bridge. It's basically a bridge for Bitcoins to Ethereum, or like a Bitcoin. Like wrapped Bitcoins. Yeah, it's a better example. So BitGo, those are coins that are like custodied by the REN team, custodied by the BitGo team. So, and I assume that over time we will get like better custody than like one guy doing it, or like one team doing it.
Bitcoin's just in this mountain owned by BitGo.
Yeah, I actually trust BitGo a lot. I think I trust it more than, REN, which is like a team I don't know. It's somewhere in Asia. So BitGo,
Still, neither option is great.
Yeah, I must say. But I mean, for me, BitGo is basically the same trust model as like Binance, I would say. And I'm personally fine, like having coins on Binance, but to be honest. So, and he said that Bitcoin will, as like more and more Bitcoins are on these other chains, they will eventually like stop moving on Bitcoin, which I think that sort of ties it back to what we discussed earlier, like the settlement assurances will go down. And also like people, why should they like send Bitcoin from A to B, right?
They have the HODL meme like really goes quite against that as well.
Yeah. I think but the HODL meme doesn't really have like a strong place sort of in Gavin's article, because why do people bridge their Bitcoin to other chains? I think they do it to do something productive with them, right? They want to use it as collateral. Yeah, mainly that. They want to trade it. I think those who want to HODL will probably always have their coins on Bitcoin, on the main Bitcoin chain. Because why not, right? I think that's why you have like the least assumptions about like the security of your coins. Like Bitcoin is actually very easy to custody, like much more so than Ethereum, for example, where you have like fewer good multi-sig wallets, for example. So I think like any exchange would probably tell you that they have more experience in custodying Bitcoin.
So he was essentially presenting a threat because of all these coins that spread out and they're therefore untransactable on the Bitcoin chain.
Yeah, he makes the argument that basically no Bitcoin will be left on the Bitcoin chain, and eventually the Bitcoin chain then doesn't matter anymore, right? Because it's living all on other chains. And I mean, it's not an uncompelling argument. I can definitely see like a future for that. I think where it becomes pretty illogical is where he says like the bridges will then burn, their Bitcoin on the main chain, because why would they ever do that? I think it doesn't make any sense. And also what he forgets is that I think the demand for BTC is not always the same on all chains. So what if Avalanche, like you have like a bunch of BTC like on the BSC and the Polygon bridge, but then Avalanche comes out, launches like its huge yield farming program. Of course, people want to bridge their BTC then to Avalanche. So how do you get them there? Then that's like the point where you still have to use the Bitcoin blockchain, right, in order to send the coins from like Polygon's bridge wallet to Avalanche's bridge wallet.
You could wrap it on Polygon in another bridge that goes direct to BSC.
Yeah, that's true.
BSC would have a wrapped Avalanche Bitcoin.
Yeah, you have like a Russian doll of trust assumptions.
I think it's pretty interesting. I like that he like wrote it, and I don't find it a very exciting future. I hope that's not future.
Yeah.
But, well, I do feel like Gavin is a bit of a clown, but
I think there's a couple of things that are challenges for Bitcoin with a couple of features that are really important. One is that the monetary policy is known and it's deterministic. It's not like the squirrely one for Ethereum or the highly inflationary one of others. And then two is just that the general security model is a known thing and good with proof of work, but not necessarily like, is it going to get netscaped basically? But I wonder if there's, and then three is the network effects, which is what makes it all work. Like the name Bitcoin is probably the most important component of Bitcoin. So, and I wonder if you can still accomplish those things, but address some of these concerns that are presented to Bitcoin, whether it's the, I don't know, what do you call that? Like the inverse incentive model between transactions and security, or the environmental effects, which I feel like native crypto people really love to minimize in terms of the PR component of it. I don't care about the truth component. Like just the PR component is very, very bad, and is a significant threat to Bitcoin. I don't understand why like there can't be more conversations about how Bitcoin moves forward amongst all that.
Honestly, I wonder the same thing. I think we should always be. I used to be much more of a hardcore Bitcoiner when I thought, this stuff was more easy to discuss back then. I think it has gotten harder to discuss than so it used to. And maybe that's because I'm not seen as, as in group anymore. I think maybe that's what makes it harder. So you accept certain like criticisms and certain like productive discussions with like people from the in group. But once you feel like the person is out group, then you start to vehemently defend against that and like try to discredit them. I think that's
it might also be bull market things, right? Like in bull markets, loads of people have made a load of money, and especially in this bull market where the people that made the most money bought the stupidest shit.
Yeah.
So it's not like, maybe it's not a super productive environment to like have serious long-term discussions on stuff when there's a lot of like gotchas and tribalism and that kind of stuff happening, and people are like maybe a little bit tilted. In the bottom of bear market, everyone's poor, so they don't feel like there's so much tribalism, or maybe there's not so much like which camp are you in, or like whatever.
Bitcoin only went down 70% and all my bags went down 99%. So obviously Bitcoin's the winner there.
Yeah, made them feel really superior, right?
Yeah. Someone in chat just said, Ledger, your opinion is disgusting. But honestly, if I'm being totally honest, I won't listen to what you're saying, Ledger. I just like that they said that. That's funny. Shout out Carlos Danker. What did you say? That's disgusting. Disgusting's a very...
I raised questions about Bitcoin from a PR perspective more than anything, but also a willingness to move forward. I don't know how to call it. I don't know. Hasu, if you want to debate Udi about it, like CMS Holdings will probably pay 6 figures just to sponsor it. So.
I'd be happy to pay to debate Udi on that. Yeah. I mean, you brought up about proof of work. I think. I mean, that's like a dark horse in like all the anti-Bitcoin arguments. I would say it's really unpredictable. I mean, I think like the environmental concerns in the world are probably only going to go up from here. Right? It's not like a trend that seems likely to reverse anytime soon. And I think that like many people in Bitcoin, and especially the miners, have sort of come around to that. That it's actually like an what do you say? It's like an unstoppable force. And now they've like created the mining council, right, in the US, and that mining council has like a target for emissions and so on, right? I think they are definitely very concerned about greenwashing. Like they realize that greenwashing has to be part of their strategy. And yeah, I think that's where we're going. I think Bitcoin's going to get hardcore greenwashed over the next like 5 years. It's probably going to get like actually cleaner, I think, because there will be social pressure on using, or not using like the most harmful forms of energy like coal. But also you would just see like a big like push on the narrative front around that.
Yeah, I just think that you have to push a really convincing argument for proof of work if on the other side of it, proof of stake is not falling over as it was predicted it would. Because otherwise, like, it's really difficult to convince the world as the planet's melting or whatever that proof of work is worth this energy when you have a alternative in front of you. Whatever one's right doesn't matter. The point is there's that narrative that will always exist. And if you can't present that well, then that's going to be a constant PR problem, and it chips away at the network effects that are currently a feature for Bitcoin. Because right now you talk about, crypto broadly, you can't say cryptocurrencies other than like Bitcoin or Doge, basically. Nobody knows what anything else is. But that could be chipped away if those problems and those questions, those PR issues don't get settled in my mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, speaking of the other ones that people don't know the name of, how do you make up all these like alternative layer one FOMO that's happening now? Because ETH scaling sucks, Bitcoin doesn't do anything, so now we've all got to go farm Ponzi's on fucking Avalanche or Solana or Nia or Algorand or like fucking Ponzi's. Whatever. Like whatever. I don't even know what half of them do. I don't even know if they've got working blockchains. I could have just said something that's not even a fucking blockchain. It might be something else. I honestly don't know. It feels a little bit to me that like Solana had a bunch of backers, a good narrative, had a monster run, and people are trying to sort of, in a mimetic way, catch up on what they missed out on by not participating in that run. So they're just picking like, right, what did Solana have that ETH and Bitcoin don't have going for them, and like picking other chains and aping into that in a sort of trying to get that.
Then they turn Solana off.
Yeah, they turn Solana off, but that's bullish. OGs know that's bullish. Yeah. And then early when these things start happening, you have the most valuable ones generally go first, and once they've gone, people move down like, fuck, well, all these things have pumped. Well, I found this one, it's called like Coconut Chain, and that one's also got low fees and it's fast, so fuck it, I'll buy that. And it gets increasingly like vapor as the wave progresses. That's my personal perspective, but I also try not to pay too much attention these days because every single ecosystem is a massive rabbit hole, and I prioritize. I was going to say like health and wellness, but honestly, the answer is League of Legends. I prioritize playing video games these days. What are your thoughts on all these like alternative layer one pumps? Is it all vapor, or are there interesting things happening in some of the networks?
I think it can be both, right? There are some interesting things happening, but when I look at like the dynamics between them right now, it feels like food Ponzi's again, basically, in the sense that you have like in DeFi summer, you used to have like so many things that all do about the same thing. They all launched their incentive programs, and it lasts for like a couple of weeks to months, and then the rewards go down, people move to, and then you get the next fork, and people move to the next thing, right? And that's sort of what it feels like now, where every chain sort of has their incentive programs, right? In Solana, it was a bit more well hidden, right? There were also incentive programs, right? With all of these, they just created like a whole bunch of DeFi coins, right? And they paid the incentives, but those were like, a lot of them were funded by like Alameda and Multicoin and so on. But now it's not even a secret anymore. You have like Avalanche or with Algorand, and you have Arbitrum and so on. They all pay like, oh, and of course Polygon was the first to do it. They all pay like incentives straight in like their own token, right? It's really interesting. I mean, what happens when those incentives run out? I mean, the goal would be, of course, for there to be like actual sticky liquidity that stays in the apps and doesn't move out. And I think we've yet to see if that's really going to be the case, or if it's all, if it's all going to move together with where the next incentives are going to be.
I guess the incentives are meant to encourage people to try something, and then if the product can stand up on its own, then perhaps that liquidity will stick, at least to some degree. But I do feel like there's probably this perpetual merry-go-round that's inevitable as the incentives just keep kind of going forth, because there's no good reason against it, I guess. If you're one of those teams that has the ability to provide incentives, and then when you provide those incentives, you get a bunch of users, and then you just kind of hope that it's not a flash in the pan, that's something more. But you're not like overly punished if it is just a flash in the pan, right?
Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt. We've got an amazing comment in the chat. It says, only one layer one besides ETH is garnering corporate sponsorships, and that's Tezos. And yet, surprise, surprise, we can't talk about it on Up Only. And why? That's the thing I look for when I'm looking for a good blockchain. It's corporate sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. Are we in that part of the cycle now where like we say corporate sponsorship with admiration and not disgust?
There's a Microsoft partnership.
I was really
again.
optimistic about Tezos, and then like I think it just went to crap. Like their mentality, I think, is very adversarial, and then also they just didn't prove to be able to recruit quality developers independent of their like paying them to do so, because it's in OCaml and people don't want to do that. Did you hear this about them trying to hire someone to fork Uniswap, and it took them a year and he still failed?
What?
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, yeah, and they have endless money to spend on that. And then also, like, the only thing that did get them traction was, I think, a pretty crappy argument about the environment with Ethereum. Like, I think if you want to give the environmental critique with Bitcoin, that's more fair, because the rebuttal against it is not near as strong as Ethereum's, which has a proof of stake transition that's underway. So I felt like Tezos is like essentially feeding that media narrative about the environment of NFTs and stuff was what got them traction for NFTs on Tezos. And I think it was weak and underhanded. So I don't know. Tezos just, it doesn't impress me anymore. So screw you, guy in the chat.
I think they did pretty well with the NFT stuff. Like, maybe it was a intellectually dishonest argument or whatever. I didn't listen to you. Sometimes when you talk, I tune out, but it's because I'm reading chat, not because I'm not listening to you. I can't concentrate on two things at once. I think they did a pretty good job. They got a bunch of traction there. They have a lot of artists that are selling at lower price points. They've made a fucking relatively voluminous product. I can't pronounce his name because they named it something dumb, but I think they did pretty well there. What my main thought on like all these alternative layer ones is, like, Bitcoin is sort of one in its category, right? It's like digital gold. It doesn't need to do anything else. It's actually kind of bearish if it does other stuff. It's like, it's become the new gold. Every generation creates their own Ponzi, and Bitcoin is one in that category. And in a way, it's not really competing with Ethereum, or it's not really competing with Solana or whatever. It's just a different kind of thing. And then you have all these layer ones that maybe just have to compete with each other forever. Like, maybe, Ethereum always has to compete with Solana, who always has to compete with Avalanche, who are always doing these incentive programs. And every fucking 3 months, there's a new smart contract chain that's got slightly better technology, because technology continues to improve. And it is just a merry-go-round forever. It's just like a VC Ponzi scheme, literally for the end of time, and chains are clawing to get traction on something. Like, maybe one tries to do compliant DeFi, maybe one gets traction with NFTs, maybe one gets traction with like something else. And as long as Ethereum scaling is like embarrassingly bad, then that like it allows that to perpetuate forever. There's so much upside in it, at least for early participants anyway, that you can just continue to play chicken, I guess, with these new blockchains. So I think that can kind of happen forever, and you end up in a case where like there's Bitcoin always exists, some culture always exists, like NFTs get moved to new current chains, and then the most like promising smart contract chain at any one time is the big one. I think that could kind of be a potential future, but if you look at it like that, then Hasu, my question for you is like, which chains have the most promising technology? Like today, what's the stuff where you're like, holy shit, if I was building Ethereum from scratch, I would have done a bunch of stuff that this project did, and I would have done a bunch. Like maybe the technology behind Cardano is just fucking incredible, and we've been trolling it all this time and not realizing.
I don't think it is.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear.
I mean, I can answer the tech question, but I would like my first answer is definitely that the tech doesn't matter nearly as much as people think. I think the value is in the state, and so in the brand and the history. So Ethereum's value cannot be copied by a new chain. It has this super valuable state, has all of these assets. I mean, all of these also assets that are native to it and that cannot just be moved over. It has all of these stories and applications. It has a huge brand. It has huge amounts of tooling around it, and developer education, developer mindshare. And yeah, if you have like an EVM chain, an EVM compatible chain, then you can copy most of that. But I mean, it has other downsides then, right? If you tie yourself to the EVM, then you cannot innovate nearly as much as some other chains that maybe we don't, right? So if Solana just copied the EVM, then they couldn't have done what they are doing with like parallelism and like basically a whole bunch of stuff around like concurrency and like why it can be so fast basically and cheap. And yeah, I mean,
so
that's
it's part of what you're saying, that you think that anything building on EVM ends up being some degree of value accrual back to Ethereum.
Yeah. I think that's probably true. I really liked like Binance Smart Chain when it came out. It felt really like something that's very value add to Ethereum, because it's almost like an incentivized testnet. It's like a smaller version of Ethereum that's much cheaper and more centralized, but it's perfect. If you want to launch a new application, new project, you should always launch it first on like Binance Smart Chain, or nowadays on like Polygon or whatever, where the fees are cheaper and you have a bit more control. And you don't need all of that security because you don't have like a high value use case. And most of all, you can't ask your users to pay like $100, to interact with a completely new protocol, unless you pay also like huge incentives. And that's probably not recommended for like a super new application. And so I think it's actually very, very important. If Ethereum didn't have these cheap test nets, then they would have to be invented, right? That's how valuable they are. So in that sense, also like Kusama for Polkadot was probably a really good idea. But mainly I think BSC and Polygon, very good for Ethereum.
I'm incentivized to ask because I have a lot of money there right now, but where does Avalanche fit in that spectrum of like ETH layer 2, or like layer 2 or sidechain or alternative layer 1?
Can we both answer?
I can't speak with much confidence about Avalanche. I mean, sort of the tech that they promised, it sounds very interesting, like a whole new like consensus protocol, and has some nice properties, but that's not what they use right now, right? Like what everybody uses right now, isn't that just like actually like a cloned EVM chain that has like
it's the C chain.
The C chain, right? That has just like regular like Ethereum like consensus with like regular ordering, like it's basically in almost every regard the same as Ethereum, right? So I feel like
it works for like regular people. I think is a worthwhile thing to note.
So it's Binance Smart Chain again.
Binance fell over. Like Binance Smart Chain fell over.
When it got too busy.
Yeah, when it got too busy, yeah. I mean, I think the Avalanche seed chain can, and if it gets popular, will have the exact same fate as Binance Smart Chain. And so I would say I think the best thing you can probably say about it is it's too mature to evaluate the actual tech because it's not live yet, right? And you cannot use it right now. I think there's no assets on like the actual Avalanche chain, right?
Like the X chain, you mean?
The X chain, yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak to anything about the X chain, but I know that as a as an EVM enjoyer, I can use the C chain, and it's cheap, and you can do strategies that are fun, like taking advantage of all these incentives, the auto compounding yield and crap, and getting paid to use people's products. So from a pure enjoyment perspective, it's like what I enjoyed about Ethereum when Ethereum had $4 transactions, except for now they're like 10 cents. And
yeah,
I know people that I'm trying to introduce to like playing on chain and doing things on chain. And they literally cannot do it on ETH layer 1. And then even within ETH layer 2, like with Arbitrum and stuff, like the finality back to the main chain, they don't want to wait 7 days. So you have to have an alternative solution to the bridge. I don't know. It just seems like I'm not saying it's the layer 1 of the future necessarily, but I wonder if the security model is advantageous relative to some side chains, if you will, but the tech is very Ethereum-esque, and that's a feature, not a bug,
I think I'm leaning more towards I'm leaning more towards what Cobie says. I think I mean, if it's actually just like a cloned EVM chain and it's going to run into the exact same problems that Ethereum has, that BSC had, where the fees go up, like infrastructure becomes less reliable, and it becomes overall like less fun to use, and then people will probably go to like a new chain that is more fun to use and cheaper. But that doesn't mean that you're not also right that like anyone who comes now into crypto and wants to experience DeFi with like a bankroll that's not huge, I would definitely tell them to use like the Avalanche seed chain, because as you're saying, it's definitely more fun to use, to be on a chain. I think there's like this perfect sweet spot, like where there is something to do on that chain. There are incentives, there are some applications, a bunch of assets, a good bridge with good user experience, and the fees are not too high yet. And I think that's always like the perfect place to start experiencing crypto, and where it unfolds its real magic.
I think that if Ethereum fees were really low, your Avalanche thing would still be pumping. Like the fees thing is a useful addendum to the narrative, which is just you can be early to the new Ponzi's. Like there are some new Ponzi's that have just started. It's your turn to be early, and there's loads of capital in crypto slushing around, waiting for like the next narrative, waiting for the next trade, waiting to make some money. Maybe they rode Solana and they're looking to rotate. Maybe they missed out on Solana and went, fuck, what's the next one of those? And if you have a copy-paste ecosystem of like, look, we took SushiSwap, we cloned it and put it here because it's the exact same base technology, but you can be early, then there becomes this gigantic viral K-factor of people saying, we should go to this chain, and they tell all their friends they should go to this chain because we can be early, and then the chart goes up, which increases the K-factor, which makes everyone go, holy shit, this stuff is the future. But really, it's just the best copy-paste Ponzi environment. And look, maybe this will age really badly because in 3 years people will play this back and be like, look, this guy didn't know what he's on about, and I'm like an Avalanche maxi or whatever. But like, it's just a useful ecosystem that's got a decent narrative where you can clone the Ponzi's. You need to have stuff to do that. The thing with Arbitrum, right? It was like, what's the point in going there? Because there was that cat farm which rugged, and there was like 2 other farms, everything rugged within like 48 hours. So there was nothing to do. So it was pointless. And Arbitrum also, you pay in ETH. So like you're not getting this additional sort of leveraged or like pseudo leveraged position where the base currency you're holding is also going up in dollar value.
That's how Sushi survived. Like it's like a vampire attack type of methodology, right? And Sushi became something out of that. And it started, the reason people chased it was because the TVL went over there and got rewarded with crap loads of sushi for doing so. So is that not a potentially successful way to go about it?
I think so for an app, but I don't think so for an entire blockchain, because it's like at the end of the day, is anyone using Avalanche for anything right now apart from this like mutual Ponzi game? And you talk about fees and like, oh, normal people can use it and it's fine, right? But then you've got these billion-dollar wallets who are all farming on Avalanche. They don't care about the fees, do they? They're just doing it because they can participate in the Ponzi as well.
So which app is the kingmaker for being like a cheaper place to do these things? Wouldn't it be like OpenSea? Like if OpenSea says we're using some layer 2.
They're about to use Tezos, by the way. They're integrating Tezos.
Yeah, but that can't support ERC 721s, can it? Like just because they're going to enable Tezos NFTs. But so my point is like, is there a kingmaker in this scenario of like somewhere more affordable? I don't care. Layer 2 sidechain, ETH layer 1's not it. Is all I'm saying. Like that's not the solution for the everyday.
What do you mean
person.
by kingmaker? Do you mean like an application or some factor?
No, an application that is a kingmaker for a platform being like the primary place of liquidity, or are we going to see this liquidity fracture last forever?
I mean, I would say, OpenSea is probably the one that comes closest, right? Because if you look in DeFi, you have fragmentation everywhere. There isn't really like one big winner. OpenSea is like the only marketplace in DeFi right now that's like actually has like more than 80% market share in its respective category.
Yeah, I mean, I should also highlight, like, I'm from the old, like, I'm old now. I'm like the old crypto, like, age. In 2012, everything was a rug. Like, the word rug didn't exist, but everything was a rug. So, like, I trained myself to, like, not believe in anything, like, find the sort of, like, reflexivity in a narrative, like, exploit that for profit to stack sats, as they say now, and get the fuck out. So you take your 5x, your 10x, and you get the fuck out and you run because you know it's going to zero eventually because everything was just vapor. And maybe it's different now, but maybe it's not.
Well, and maybe that would be a very disappointing outcome in the sense of what if the end result is once again we ask ourselves in a bear market, why did we need to put any of this crap on a blockchain? Which is kind of what happened after 2017. And now that there's money involved, it's like, you win tokens, sir, like for anything. So if the outcome ends up being, well, now we have built all this infrastructure for blockchain applications, but we still don't really know what to put on a blockchain, like that would be not great. What do you think?
I have a sense that we will never have like these strong doubts again over what blockchain is going to be useful for. Yeah, it's true that we don't really have like a huge like application with mass appeal yet, but I think DeFi has given a very compelling vision of what blockchains are useful for. I think just this ability to use like non-custodial financial applications that also compose perfectly with each other, and where you can like tap into everyone's liquidity, like you can rehypothecate your assets, like you can use like one app's position inside another app. And I think that's all like really magical. And I think it just clicks, especially for people who are somewhat familiar with like the traditional financial system. At least that's my experience. And that's to me is a very good sign that this isn't going anywhere.
And I agree with you for what it's worth, but like I can also see that more antagonist point of view.
I think a good like way to think about this stuff is like when you use wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, right? You, as Hasu said while I was getting a drink, I think he was like, you do it because you want the asset to be productive, right? You want to use it as collateral. You want to use it in some way. Just replace wrapped Bitcoin with like wrapped everything else. And then I think blockchains might start to make more sense. But we got to ask Jason from Telegram about this stuff because he always sends me long rants about like how he wants to wrap his house or whatever.
Yeah, but then every time he comes on, he shills like a small cap token.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets drunk before the shows or whatever. I don't know. We'll have to ask him. Anyway, let's get back to some serious topics. We've been streaming for 2 hours, so we'll wrap it up relatively soon, I imagine. Hasu, I want to ask if there are people watching that like got into crypto similar time to you and now feeling bad about themselves because they people pleaser hasn't named themselves hasn't named themselves Hasu pleaser about them or whatever. Or maybe they've only got into crypto this year and like they've made a few bad trades and they've underperformed or whatever. What should they be doing? How should they be going about learning? And what did you do to learn in order to figure out like how can they achieve like whatever goals they've set themselves over the next few years?
First of all, I would say don't compare yourself to me. I mean, I don't mean that in like an arrogant way, I hope, because I was in an incredibly fortunate position where I had made enough money in poker that I could say, I don't have to work for anyone but myself for like the next 2 to 3 years and still be fine. So I had this time, to invest in myself. And I mean, that's just incredibly valuable, right? If you can like forego like compensation for so long and only do stuff that you think has a very positive like long-term effect. If someone can afford that, then I would always recommend doing it. And I think the closest to that is probably if you're really young and have very, very low expenses, right? So crypto is like full of very young people who may still be living at home, like with their parents. And I think you should really use that time, in order to basically do the things that you cannot afford to do when you're older, which is like go really, really like in depth into certain topics and just try to learn as much as possible without having to do it for someone other than yourself, and just experiment like with a lot of different ideas. It all sounds so cliche, right? And so general. It's very hard to give like very concrete advice. Crypto nowadays is so full of different topics, right? And probably for every topic you have to like be more precise, and that's like probably a playbook that works.
I mean, I just heard you say to a bunch of crypto people to continue living in their parents' basements. So I don't think they'll have a problem with maintaining that status quo.
Yeah, I appreciate what you got going there. I would say life gets more complicated later.
And then what do you make of all the regulation stuff that's going on at the moment with, you got Gensler, who's new, like most memed on crypto Twitter. You've had Lizzie Warren going on about stuff, had a meeting with MakerDAO or something recently.
Mm-hmm.
You've had a lot of it from the US. It's like starting to feel a little bit hostile. And at the same time, you have to start wondering if stable coins are actually sort of a weak link in the ecosystem because they do have a central issuer that, there can be like centralized pressure applied to. There'll be tons of like smart contracts where they can't be changed. they just exist. They're code on the internet. They run on Ethereum and no one can do anything about that. But a stablecoin issuer, pressure could be applied to a particular stablecoin issuer to say, okay, your stablecoins cannot interact with these smart contracts or something. And if there is a centralized issuer, then there are legal recourse for them and blah 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 blah. So how do you feel about like generally the sentiment with regulators and politicians regarding crypto, and then 2, how important do you find a decentralized stablecoin, and is there any hope, or do they all just go to zero?
Okay, so when we had this infrastructure bill drama, I think that was one of the most bullish things that ever happened in crypto, to be honest. I mean, to see how this pretty small community like rallied around this decision and got on like the front page of various financial media and just installed this bill for like almost unilaterally for like 3 days. I think that was so insane, and made me super bullish about like the future of crypto, because you can tell that more and more politicians are getting invested in this, not just financially, but more so like that they see it as a topic that their people care about. And I would still after, even like in spite of like various bad news we've had after that, I still I'm feeling some afterglow still from that event, and it's probably not going to go away anytime soon. I think it's always like important to like not get like the big events like clouded by like a bunch of small stuff that happens afterwards. So I think that's probably still the number one relevant like event of 2021 for crypto regulation. And so my overall view is still pretty positive because I didn't expect crypto to have such a big, like so much leverage yet over US politics. And that's really, really good. When I see Gary Gensler, I mean, before he became, SEC chair, I had a lot of respect for him. I watched his course on blockchain, and he seemed like an overall, good guy. I don't really understand what changed. It seems like he doesn't have. It seems like he doesn't have like a lot of power, to be honest. That's what it seems like to me. Like he doesn't have a lot of control. Like he cannot do all the stuff that he wants to do, and so he's like attacking mostly with words, and feels like he's trying to crash the market, or like strongman like the Senate into giving him more power basically to actually do the stuff that he wants to do. And I'm not sure if it's going to work. And something else that I'm looking at is sort of their case against Ripple. I mean, I hate Ripple. It's probably no secret, but I'm still hoping that they win their case because I think it would be really important for crypto. XRP is like such an obvious security that if they cannot win this case, then if this again ends in a settlement, and it's looking like it will, then I mean, I think that just is going to make it very, very, very hard. Like with every sort of precedent that they failed to set, it's very positive. I think the position of the SEC gets undermined further, and yeah.
Why do you hate Ripple?
Why do I hate Ripple? Like a lot of similar to what Ledger said earlier. It's like a lot of very bad faith arguments. It's like pretty useless coin. And I mean, just the origin, like how they lie about the origin story and how they like used all of the supply that they own to manipulate the market, how their product is basically selling XRP to retail, and everything else is just window dressing. I think that's probably the biggest one. That
is fair enough. That's fair enough. Just all the common reasons. Then, do you think Gary Gensler looks a bit like Mr. Burns from Simpsons?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
like, he just looks like him, doesn't he? Anyway, yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, don't you? I think it could also potentially be like revenue maximization strategy, right? Where like, you go after Ripple, you get a settlement, they pay you a bunch of money, and you're getting like more from your settlements than you're getting in funding directly from the government anyway. So maybe they see those as wins, even if they don't outright win the case. But let's see. I do think that the Ripple thing is going to be interesting. I also not a huge fan of Ripple. I think it's been like the sort of left curve sort of choice for a long time. But when Brad tweeted the welcome to the party, was it with Brian from Coinbase? I was like, I did laugh at that tweet. I was like, that's quite funny. Fair play.
Yeah.
I feel like most of the retail Ripple narrative moved on basically when it got delisted from Coinbase.
Yeah, they bought Cardano.
Yeah.
It's actually crazy. Like every like retail crypto buyer I know owns Cardano. Many more than Bitcoin. Like everybody.
Yeah, do you think it's because it starts with an A? So it's like first in the list, or like early.
Yeah, high up, they don't need to do much. They don't need to get far down. That's why Aave went so hard as well early in the year. It was like right at the top.
One. I'll buy that.
No, I think they're just very good. I think they're very good at marketing. I think they market a lot of stuff that's not related to the chain, sort of like what Ripple did. A lot of like authority stuff. They like appeal to these existing powers. So people can put it into their framework of how they think the world works. And they go, oh, I understand why this might have value now because it's drawing value from this thing that already has value. And Ripple did it with the banking system, right? It was like Swift or whatever is going to move to Ripple.
They could never get anybody to use their stuff unless they pay a lot of Ripple to do it.
I think I think it makes sense. And like Charles got a very popular YouTube channel. Like if you go on there and chill your shit all the time, it's like some people are gonna listen. But it is true. I've met a bunch of people. The only crypto they own is Cardano. They're the only one. It's like they didn't buy anything else. That's the one they heard about first, and they bought it. And the only time that's ever happened before was Binance, BNB. People got onboarded through Binance, bought Binance, and interacted on BSC. So it's cool. They've done some stuff very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly like a lot of respect for like something like Cardano or XRP. I mean, at least Cardano is not vaporware, right? They do have a product. It's coming out very slowly and probably has a lot of problems. It seems almost like something from the past, right? It's like with now they have this like UTXO model and they want to do DeFi on it, and it's going to be a nightmare. Like frankly, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be so clunky and so terrible UX compared to like the account model that Ethereum uses, and they've been working on this for years. I mean, that's why it's like, yeah, they just didn't. Their development process is so slow that like the market is like in a stage now where actually like I don't think it's gonna work, at least like reaching feature parity with something like Ethereum based on like their outdated architecture. It seems like they wanted to make like a better Bitcoin, much more so than making a better Ethereum.
Yeah, possibly. Or maybe just didn't see DeFi coming the way DeFi played out, I guess. Because like a bunch of the assumptions about how Cardano was designed was just pre-DeFi, right?
Yeah.
So maybe just didn't see that, but we'll see. And like also like, you know, they can maybe skirt around a bunch of that just by using centralization as a band-aid. And people don't really care about whether something is decentralized or not on like the retail Ponzi side. Like I'm fully convinced that I'm fully convinced I could launch a spreadsheet, right? And as long as you could interact with it kind of through a wallet and like Ponzi numbers went up, people would like not care. If they were making money, they could make real money from it. I don't think they'd care very much. So they could also do that and it would probably do fine.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I mean, all of those problems have solutions in the realm of you just use a centralized band-aid and it's going to work.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to start working on my spreadsheet. I'm going to do a crowd sale.
Well, last week you were going to do the ledger, and this week you're going to do the spreadsheet ledger. Yeah,
but the spreadsheet ledger is mine. Ledger is something else.
Oh, okay.
That's a serious, legitimate project. I've got VC backing.
The pre-sale is underway.
Yeah, the spreadsheet thing is just a joke, but the ledger, that's real.
Okay, good. Glad we got that settled.
Ledger, you want to ask the final questions and see us out for the evening?
Yeah.
Before your family returns.
Hasu, you've probably been insulted by the general level of intelligence on episodes that you've listened to before, so you didn't get to this point. But at the end of an episode, we usually ask our guests to give us some alpha for our listeners to take home, something that they can learn from, use as inspiration. It could be anything from a valuable quote or a book that you've read or a saying that you live by, or some words of wisdom that you have for the audience so that they can too make it. If you have anything for them, we'd love to hear it.
How did I forget about that part of the show?
How do we become smart, mate? How do we become happy? Tell me, I've been searching for happiness for so long now.
No, honestly, I would say a lot of important skills in life, but I think the most important one is learning how to learn. I've said this like many times to many people, but it's something that I didn't learn in school. Not really anyway. Like stuff was always sort of too easy that I didn't really have ever to study like for anything or like push myself hard for anything. And then like when I went to university, that was no longer the case. And I realized, this is like everyone's here is, as smart as me or smarter. And I have to like study real hard for these exams and, to keep up. And then at the same time, like poker came around, I had like a real motivation to get better. And I took a course that was called Learning How to Learn. I think it was like a MOOC. was a lot about like learning psychology, how you can create like positive habits in yourself, like just a lot of really good mental models for how you actually approach learning and how that works like in your head. And I would say that's like my number one advice, like sort of paired with the book, like The Art of Learning, from Josh Waitzkin. I think that's like one of my favorite books. I think check out maybe this MOOC and check out the book if you're like into this kind of stuff. And for me, it has made all the difference. I think it's something that you learn once, and after that, everything comes much easier to you. And like it'll be much easier to keep learning for the rest of your life.
Awesome.
There you go, Ledger. It feels like you need to personally follow this advice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Lexi in the chat said that we all need to become learners. Hasu, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here. It has been an absolute pleasure. Cobie, thank you, sir. Go to uponly.tv/FTX. Make a trade there today if you hadn't done it before. Track your portfolio, earn yield on your tokens, all that good stuff. You can do it at uponly.tv/FTX. Bye-bye.